My wife, Lisa, and I lived in a small town in West Virginia. We both came from very large families, but our parents were the only ones who didn't have many children. Lisa's mother had a sister named Audra who was 10 years older than her, but didn't have any kids. Audra was always more like a big sister than an aunt to Lisa. They were really close and talked on the phone almost every day. When we would go to Lisa's parents' house for visits, it wasn't uncommon for Audra to be there as well. She had become my favorite because she was so easy to talk to and get along with. Since we all lived in the same small town, it wasn't strange for me to run into Aunt Audra at the grocery store or post office from time to time when I was out running errands or going about my daily routine. Each time this happened, I found myself lingering longer in conversation with her than I needed to, just because I enjoyed talking with her so much. Aunt Audra had recently gone through a divorce and was now living alone in a small house that she had inherited from her parents after they passed away several years ago. One day after work, I decided to go visit Aunt Audra just to check up on her and see how she was handling being alone after the divorce. When I arrived at her house, she invited me inside and offered me something to drink. We sat down on the couch and began talking about how things were going since the divorce. She told me that things were tough at first, but they were getting better each day. I could tell that she still seemed a little sad about everything that happened during the divorce process. After we finished talking about her situation, Aunt Audra started asking me how things were going with my job and other aspects of my life. Then she started asking personal questions about mine and Lisa's love life. She asked, "Do you and Lisa have a good sex life?" I was taken aback by the question, but answered, "Yeah, I think so." "Why do you ask?" Aunt Audra said, "Well, being divorced and living alone now, I don't have anyone to take care of me in that way anymore. I was just curious if you and Lisa are still intimate, if it has fizzled out like most marriages after a few years." I replied, "No, things are still good between us in that department. We make time for each other regularly and try to keep the flame alive." Aunt Audra then asked me another surprising question. She said, "Would you mind taking care of my needs since I don't have anyone else to do it for me anymore?" I was shocked by her boldness, but also intrigued by the idea. Aunt Audra was a very attractive woman even though she was in her late 40s now. She had long brown hair with some gray starting to show through around the temples. She had a curvy figure with large breasts that always drew my attention whenever we saw each other. I replied, "I'm flattered by your offer, but I don't know if I can accept it. It seems wrong somehow." Aunt Audra said, "Well, think about it at least. If you change your mind or decide that you want to give it a try sometime, just let me know." With that statement hanging in the air between us, our conversation shifted back to more mundane topics like work and current events. After about 30 minutes of small talk on the couch together, I decided it was probably time for me to head home since Lisa would be getting off work soon. As I stood up from the couch and started walking towards the front door, Aunt Audra called out to me from behind saying, "So what do you think? Are you going to take me up on my offer or not?" I paused for a moment to consider her question and then replied, "Okay, I'll do it. When would you like me to come over?" Aunt Audra smiled and said, "How about this weekend? Lisa is working the night shift on Saturday, so she won't be home until early Sunday morning. You can come over after work on Saturday evening if that works for you." I agreed to her suggestion and then quickly made my exit from the house before things could get even more awkward. During the rest of the week, I couldn't stop thinking about what I had gotten myself into with Aunt Audra. Part of me was dreading having sex with her because it felt like such a betrayal of Lisa's trust. But another part of me was also excited by the prospect of finally being intimate with Aunt Audra after fantasizing about it for many years. When Saturday finally arrived, I found myself getting more nervous as each hour passed by. I kept thinking that there was still time to back out if I wanted to, but then quickly dismissed that thought when images of Aunt Audra's naked body filled my mind. Finally, around 6 p.m., I mustered up enough courage to get in my car and drive over to Aunt Audra's house. As I pulled into her driveway, my heart was racing with both excitement and fear. I knocked on her front door and she opened it almost immediately, as if she were waiting right behind it for me to arrive. She greeted me with a warm smile and asked if I would like something to drink. I declined her offer since I didn't want anything clouding my judgment or lowering my inhibitions before we got started. Aunt Audra led me down the hallway from the living room area towards her bedroom at the end of the hall. My eyes wandered all around as we walked down the hall, taking in all of the family pictures on the walls. I thought to myself that I was about to have sex with the woman in these pictures and couldn't believe how fortunate I was. When we arrived at Aunt Audra's bedroom, she closed and locked the door behind us. Then she turned to me and said, "Are you sure you want to do this? We don't have to if you're having second thoughts." I replied, "No, I'm definitely sure about it now. Let's get started before I change my mind once again." With that, Aunt Audra began unbuttoning her blouse and removing it, revealing a lacy black bra that barely contained her large breasts. My eyes were fixated on her cleavage as she reached behind her back and unhooked the clasp of her bra, letting it fall to the floor. Her body was even more magnificent than I had imagined they would be. The skin was beautiful, firm for a woman of her age, with large pink nipples that were fully erect from being exposed to the cool air in the room. Aunt Audra noticed my gaze on her chest and jokingly said, "Take a picture. It will last longer." We both laughed at her comment, which helped to break some of the tension in the room. Then she stepped forward and began unbuttoning my shirt as well until we were both standing there half naked before each other. I took a step closer towards Aunt Audra and ran my hands up and down her sides, feeling the smoothness of her skin under my fingertips. She shivered slightly as my hands traced their way over every inch of her torso. Aunt Audra then placed one hand on each side of my face, pulling me towards hers for our first kiss together. Her lips felt so soft against mine as they gently caressed each other in a slow, passionate kiss. After a few minutes of kissing, Aunt Audra took my hand and led me over to her queen-sized bed in the middle of the room. She sat down on the edge of the bed and motioned for me to stand in front of her so she could remove my pants. I unbuckled my belt and unzipped my pants, letting them fall to the floor, revealing a pair of dark gray boxers. Aunt Audra bit her lower lip seductively as she reached out and ran her fingers lightly over my boxers. Then she hooked her fingers into the waistband of my boxers and pulled them down to my ankles. Aunt Audra looked up at me and said, "You're even bigger than I thought you would be." Lisa is a lucky woman. In the hours that followed, we were glued to each other. It was as if our bodies were melting together, so close was the physical and emotional connection between us. Finally, we both collapsed onto the bed in a sweaty heap of satisfied lust. Our chests heaved as we struggled to catch our breaths. After a few moments, Aunt Audra rolled off of me with a contented sigh. "That was amazing," she said with a sleepy smile. "Even better than I imagined." I couldn't help but grin at her words. It felt incredible to know that I had lived up to her expectations and had given her so much pleasure. As we lay there basking in the afterglow, Aunt Audra reached over to give my hand a gentle squeeze. "Thank you for this, sweetheart," she said softly. "I've wanted you for so long, and I'm glad we finally had the chance to be together." I turned to look at her, feeling a surge of affection for the beautiful woman lying next to me. "I'm glad too," I said honestly. "I've always been attracted to you, Aunt Audra, and being able to make this fantasy a reality means more to me than I can put into words." She smiled at me and leaned in for a sweet, lingering kiss. As our lips met, I felt a sense of connection and intimacy that went far beyond the physical act we had just shared. In that moment, I knew that what Aunt Audra and I had was something special, and as we explored each other's bodies once again, I couldn't wait to see where this new chapter in our relationship would take us.